Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Sanhedrin. I want to dedicate the shiur to the memory of Avril's mum, whose yortzeit is on tomorrow, in fact.
It's actually my mum's yortzeit today.
Oh, okay. So tomorrow we have Rivka Leah Bat Yitzchak Wolf. That's Avril's mum. We dedicate the shiur to her. And Julia's mum's yortzeit is today. Her name is?
Leah Bat Avram Yehuda Halevi.
Leah Bat Avram Yehuda Halevi. We dedicate the shiur to his memory as well. Her memory, yes, Bat Leah, yeah. Okay, that's her memory as well.
Linda's got yortzeit on Shushan Purim.
Oh, and there's another one. Okay, what's it, for whom?
Helena Yocheved.
Helena Yocheved Bat Hillel.
Yeah.
Okay, so three fine ladies whose yortzeit are this week. We'll dedicate the shiur to all of them. And their memory should be a blessing, and their neshamot should have an aliyah from what I hope will be a very interesting shiur. Here's the late Mr. Glasky. Let's let him in. Okay. Right. Let's get into it. We are going to start a new Mishnah today, and it's going to be very interesting because it raises issues which are very relevant to our current situation, as you will see. Let's get straight into it. It's the Mishnah on page 20b, Daf Chaf Amud Bet, and is on page 118 if you are following in the Steinsaltz. And I will share my screen with you in a moment, once I can find it. There it is. You should have it up on your screen in a mo. There we are. Okay, so the Mishnah says, Umotzi lemilchemet harashut al pi beit din shel shivim ve'echad. And he brings out the people. Who are we talking about here? Who brings out the people?
Okay.
The king. The king, that's right. The king brings out the people. What does it mean? Motzi etam means to go out to war, right? We spoke about it, didn't we? That the expression "your goings out and your comings in" means your war time. You go out to war and you come in when you have finished the war. We say it every morning in the Tehillim, don't we? Hashem Yishmor et tzeitcha uvoecha. Yeah, Hashem should Yishmor. Hashem should guard you in your goings out and your comings in, and that it means specifically in your battles, your war battles. So umotzi la milchemet harashut, the king takes out the people to an optional war. We'll come back to that in a moment. In very great detail. Al pi beit din shel shivim ve'echad, according to the only on the mouth of al pi, in other words, with the consent of a beit din of 71 people. In other words, the great Sanhedrin. So, if the king wants to take out the people to war, he needs the agreement of the great Sanhedrin. It's a little bit like that in current times, is it not? That if a prime minister who is effectively in the position of the king, not exactly in the position of the king because he's elected, but to all intents and purposes, he is the leader of the people. If he wants to take the people into war, there has to be agreement of, not the Sanhedrin, because we don't have a Sanhedrin, but there has to be agreement of Parliament, right? In Israel. Well, no, more than the war cabinet, actually, Johnny. I mean, I don't know what the official law is, but in practice, what happens is Parliament, i.e. in Israel, the Knesset, in England, the House of Commons, has to approve taking the nation to war. if you cast your minds back to 2003 with Iraq, the Iraq War in the UK, I'm looking around. Apart from Larry and Sharon, we're all Brits. So I'm speaking, Larry and Sharon, about I'm speaking about the British involvement in the Iraq War. You can tell us in a moment what the situation is in America, but certainly there was some doubt about whether Parliament would agree to the British involvement in the war in Iraq. Tony Blair, who was Prime Minister at the time, had a bit of a job on his hands, didn't he, to persuade Parliament to back him. They did in the end, of course, and they went to war. So that's the situation in the UK. In the Knesset has to approve going out to war. What's the story in America, Sharon?
In America, the Constitution grants Congress solely the power to declare war. Congress has declared war on 11 occasions, including its first declaration of war in 1812 with Great Britain. Its last formal war declaration was World War II. And I believe that we have not yet formally ended the state of war with Vietnam. I think that's the case, but don't quote me.
Okay, so that's interesting. So in the Iraq War, that didn't require Congress's consent by the sound of it?
Apparently not. I don't know. I have not looked into this issue of the laws of war in America.
Okay, that's your homework for next time, Sharon.
For 2 weeks.
Yeah, a little treatise for us on that. But in any event,
it says here in Google, it says since 1945, developments in international law, such as the United Nations Charter, which prohibits both the threat and the use of force in international conflicts, have made declarations of war largely obsolete in international relations.
okay, that's
It's not a declaration of war,
Yeah.
it's a permission to go to.
That's the difference
Okay,
here.
from the constitutional perspective, the conflict in Vietnam was not technically a war.
And
So
so
there you
presumably
go.
the same would be said about Iraq as well.
Yes, I would presume
Yeah.
so. That would be more like
Yeah.
what we call in Israel an operation.
Yes. Okay, it's interesting. Anyway, our Mishnah is very clear that a milchemet reshut, an optional war, as Rav Steinsaltz describes it, can only be instituted with the consent of the Great Sanhedrin. Now, that's very interesting what Sharon has just told us, that the operation in Vietnam was not considered technically a war and therefore didn't need Congress's consent. Michael Krauss doesn't like that, but there you go. I dare say there were a lot of people in America who would agree with you, Michael. However,
it seems that there are
I can see a difference.
resolutions that take the place of a declaration of war, a joint resolution of Congress.
Oh, okay. So it seems that there is some discrepancy as to what constitutes a war, and that is interesting because what I'm going to spend probably the rest of this shiur on are those two words here. You know, we don't go very fast in this shiur. We're going to spend the rest of the shiur on two words: milchemet hareshut. What does it mean, an optional war? Julia, you wanted to say something just then.
No, all I was thinking was that I can see the difference between a declaration of war, because that's what Neville Chamberlain did, and this country is now at war with Germany, but we've never had that for Iraq. For Iraq, we got consent to go in and fight. Okay,
so again, so it's semantics we're talking, aren't we, really? We're talking semantics. When is a war? And that is what this is all about.
I don't think it's necessarily semantics. I can see that the difference between World War II, where the countries were involved per se, whereas an operation, which is the word Sharon used, is where you go into another country to potentially right a wrong, but you're not expecting them to be attacking you. I mean, Vietnam never went over to America to attack America. There was never that potential. In England for World War II, we had the potential that Germany would come and bomb us. It worked both ways. It was a corrective operation as far as the Americans were concerned going into Vietnam, similarly with the British in Iraq.
How do you therefore consider the American involvement in World War II? Because there was no suggestion that Germany would fly across the Atlantic and bomb
No,
America.
but Japan
No, you forget
bombed
about
Pearl
Japan. And they
Harbor.
were,
Japan
and they
was-
were in alliance.
Okay, so Japan was a threat. Obviously, Pearl Harbor they attacked, and therefore, because they were in alliance with the Germans, that constituted a war against Germany. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, well, there is some semantics here, because what we're going to talk about here is Milchemet Reshut. This word's Milchemet Reshut, an optional war. We have actually spoken about this approximately 4 years ago, maybe a bit more than 4 years ago, because we have learnt this halacha before, haven't we?
Mhm.
Where have we learnt this? I just gave you a clue. Where have we learnt this halacha before?
When we were looking at what the purpose of the Great Sanhedrin and what powers it has, one of the when we were looking at the numbers of judges and
That's right.
So we
Yeah.
would have looked at 71. One of the powers was to grant the authority for war.
Correct. And to put it another way, we learnt it in the very first Mishnah, which is why I know it was 4.5 years ago. Let me take you back to the very first Mishnah on Daf Bet Amud Aleph. There's a good question. Why does the Gemarah begin on page 2 and not on page 1? Don't know. Maybe David Marks knows the answer to that question. But anyway, it does. All Gemarahs begin on page 2. And this was the very first Mishnah that we learnt. Okay. And it says in this Mishnah, remember, it was a very long Mishnah. It took us the whole chapter. It took us 4 years to learn this Mishnah and the Gemarah that went with it. Let's have a look. Let's just find the right bit on here.
Johnny,
Yes.
if I wanted to go back and read this entire first Mishnah, and I wanted to do it just online, how would I find it?
The actual Mishnah?
Yeah, what you just scrolled through, the first
Okay.
Mishnah that you talk about. What is
okay?
It's Parak 1, Daf 2.
So you would go to put it into Safaria.
Yeah.
And you would put Sanhedrin.
Mm-hmm.
Sanhedrin chapter 1, Mishnah 1.
Okay, good. It's been a while and I think it's time.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just looking for where in the Mishnah it is. I'm going to look in my actual Mishnah to help me out, my actual Gemarah in front of me. Give me a sec and I'll find it for you. Here we go. Here we go. Ein mutzin lamilchama harashut. Okay. Ein milchama mutzin irhani dachat. Here we go. There we go. Found it. See there? Ein mutzin lamilchemet harashut ela al pi beit din shel shivim echad. The king may bring the nation out in an optional war. Okay, and he tells us what it means, only on the basis of a court of 71 judges. Okay, so we've learnt this previously on page 9 of the Steinsaltz, if you wanted to have a look at it there. We're going to go back to page 118 to 20b, to our Mishnah, and it says exactly the same thing. And you'll see in a moment when we go through to the Gemarah that the Gemarah asks the question, why are we learning this again? So let's just do the Mishnah, and then I'm going to not go into the explanations of what the rest of the Mishnah mean. I'm going to jump to the Gemarah and spend the next few weeks talking about this part of the Mishnah, that the king can only bring out the people to an optional war with the Beit Din of 71. But let's just finish the rest of the Mishnah just so that we're complete. Uporetz. What does the word poretz mean?
It's spread out.
That is porates.
Ufaratsta.
With
No?
uforatsta, yes, it means to in that way, yes, okay. Uforatsta, same word, yes, good. Who knows a biblical character with a name like that?
Parrots, isn't it?
Peretz, yes, Peretz. It's a shame that Paul Westbrook isn't here because he's called Peretz, and he told me he was called Peretz when I cast aspersions on his name Paul, being a not somebody who we are overly fond of, the original Paul. And he said, "I'm not Paul, I'm Peretz." So, who was Peretz, Leslie? Apart from
Something to
Paul
do with-
Westbrook.
Is it something to do with David? King David?
Yes, correct. Peretz was an ancestor of King David. There's another clue. Who was Peretz?
I think he was a son of Yehuda.
He was indeed. He was indeed. Who was his mother?
I think she was the lady who the husband died, and she was promised to another one of Yaakov's sons, and
Yehuda's sons.
Yehuda's sons, and it never happened. And she dressed up as a lady of the night and took something from Peretz that
No, from Yehuda.
she later redeemed when she was in her distressed state.
Okay, that is more or less correct. Well done. The story of Yehuda and Tamar was her name. You remember Tamar?
Yeah.
Tamar was the daughter-in-law of Yehuda. She was married first to Er and then to Onan, and they both died. And she was then promised to Shelah, the third son of Yehuda. Yehuda failed to fulfill his commitment. Tamar then dressed up as a prostitute. Yehuda availed himself of her services, and she became pregnant. As a result of that liaison, she gave birth to twins, one of which was Peretz. Okay, one of which was Peretz, and he was called Peretz because the word Peretz, and this is why I'm stressing this, Peretz means to break through. He broke through. What was the story with those twins? The story with those twins is that one of them started to come out first, stuck his arm out first, and the midwives put a reuter bendel, a red bendel on him, right, to designate that he was out first. And then he put his hand back in, and the next one pushed him out of the way, and broke through. That was Peretz, and that's why he was given the name Peretz. He broke through, and he became, as somebody said, I'm not sure who it was, said that he became the ancestor of King David. King David, as we know, is from the tribe of Yehuda. Peretz was his, I can't remember how many greats it is, but great grandfather. And that was Peretz, and it means to break through. So in our Mishnah, uporetz.
Story's a bit like Yaakov and Esav.
In terms of the birth, in that, well, not that Yaakov pushed Esav out of the way, but Yaakov was holding on to the heel of Esav. Yeah, there were twins, that there was an odd birth in that regard. Yeah. So poretz, uporetz, the king is allowed to break through. What is he allowed to break through? La'asot lo derech. He can break through something in order to make himself a path. So, in other words, he can break through your fence and make his way through your property. He can make a path through your property. If you have a garden and the king needs to get from A to B and your garden's in the way, the king has permission to break down your fence and walk through your garden and go out the other end. Ve'ein memacher biyado. And nobody can stop him. Okay, nobody can stop him. The king has permission to do that. We'll go to it in great detail after we've finished talking about the Melchemet Reshut, but that's what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says that a king has permission to go through somebody's property. Next thing in the Mishnah, Derech HaMelech. What's Derech HaMelech?
The way of the king, king's way.
The king's pathway, the king's highway, I think we would say in English, yes? The king's highway. Ein lo shiur. There's no measure of it. What does that mean? It means that when I am carving my way through your property, and I'm the king, I do not have to limit myself to a narrow path through your garden. I can make it as wide as I like, right? I don't have to be worried about your garden and make it just, enough room for one person, make it single file. I can make it as wide as I like, and you can't stop me. Next thing, v'chol ha'am bozazin. Bozazin. All the people, where do you heard that word bozazin or something like it?
To ridicule.
Say that again, Hannah.
To ridicule.
I can't hear what you're saying.
Oh, okay, wait on. It's to ridicule, to mock.
Oh, to ridicule. No, that's not what it. Yeah, that's not what it means here. I'll give you a clue. You're going to hear it several times in the next few days. Yes, it's in the Megillah, correct. The word in the Megillah is lavuz. Lavuz. What do you do when you go to war? When you've won?
You rejoice.
You rejoice, yeah. But Michael Krauss said it. Go on, Michael.
You take the spoils.
You take the spoils. The spoils are called the buz. Buz is the spoils. So v'chol ha'am bozazin. All the people, when you go out to war, all the people take all the spoils, right?
Booty.
The booty, yeah.
Take all the same word. Booty.
Yeah, boozy, yeah, booty, maybe. The people take all the spoils of war, and what do they do with them? Can they keep them for themselves? No. Mishnah says, "V'not nim lo." They give all the spoils to him. Who's him?
The king.
The king. And what does the king do? V'hu notel chelek barosh. And he takes his share first. So if you're a soldier and you go in and you take the spoils of war, you can't just stick it in your back pocket and say, I'll have this. Yeah, all has to go to the king. The king then has a look around. Will later on in the Gemarah will tell us what percentage he gets. But whatever that percentage is, which we'll learn later, he gets first whack. Okay, he gets first dibs on the spoil of war. That's what the Mishnah says. Okay, so we've learned a few different halachot there on the Mishnah. You'll not be surprised to know that there's a lot of Gemarah on this Mishnah because it needs a lot of explanation and going into more detail. So we'll start with the first bit of this idea that the king needs permission of the Bet Din, the Sanhedrin Agadol, in order to take the people out to a Milchemet Reshut.
It's fine like going through a person's private property, Johnny. It's only when you're at war, though. It's not. You can't just do it. Okay,
you'll have to wait and see, Johnny.
Oh, okay.
It's a fair question, and it's a question that the Gemarah asks.
Johnny,
I'm not going to tell you the answer because then it'll spoil it. Okay, but yes, it's a fair question. Does that apply just to time of war, or can the king just do it whenever he wants? We'll see later on in the Gemarah. Yes, David.
Reading on the left.
have you seen any comment on why the Mishnah starts with a Vav? What's the connection between this and the previous Mishnah, other than it's to do with the king? And it is and the whole subject started with the differences between the king and the Kohen Gadol in various manners.
Okay, so let's look at the end of the first Mishnah then. Well, end of the previous Mishnah, which is this is the second Mishnah in chapter 2, isn't it?
The fourth.
Are we in the fourth Mishnah already?
According to Seder Mishnayot, yeah.
No, I'm talking about according to the Gemarah. We're only in the second Mishnah.
Okay.
So let's just have a look at the end of the previous Mishnah then, and see what your question is exactly. David's question is, our Mishnah begins with a vav, which means and. So the previous Mishnah ended, if I'm not mistaken, something to do with our dargash, no?
All people recline on the ground
yeah.
and he lies on the dargash.
So the first Mishnah is talking about the laws of a king, what happens when he's sitting Shiva, and then it continues with the further laws of the king, and he is only able to take them out to war with the consent of the Beit Din. So what's your question, David? That sounds fairly straightforward. We're still talking about a king.
I can't see the connection between the laws of bereavement to a king and the king having to rely on the Sanhedrin for Milchemet Reshut.
Well, I suppose the only connection is it's the laws of the king, isn't it?
Well, maybe it's because if he goes to war, then people are going to die, and maybe the king's going to be in mourning.
Maybe. I don't know. I've never. It didn't occur to me. The question didn't occur to me actually. Have you seen anything, David?
I would think it's because we're discussing what when the Sanhedrin gets involved. That's the name of our tractate.
Well, I don't think that's the case here, Sharon, because we dealt with what the 71 Beit Din does back in that chapter 1, Mishnah 1 that you're going to look up. That is the place where we dealt with the numbers.
Okay,
here,
I'm corrected.
This is dealing with the authority of the king. This Mishnah is about the authority of the king. Maybe the connection, David, is that the end of the last Mishnah, we see somebody is giving me feedback here. Don't know who it is.
Sorry, it was me. Somebody just came in and I answered them.
Okay. I'm going to mute you in the meantime so it doesn't happen again. Unmute when you want to talk. So maybe, David, the connection is this. At the end of the last Mishnah, we spoke about an unusual situation that the king, when he's in mourning, sits higher up than the people who come to visit him. Normally, it's the other way around. And maybe that is because, well, not maybe, it is because of the position and authority and kavod of the king. And maybe what this is telling us, and this is the connection, is that despite the fact that the king is in a position where he doesn't sit on the floor and he's much more important than the rest of the people, despite that, he cannot take the people out to war without the consent of a 71 Sanhedrin. How does that sound?
Yeah, I'd buy that.
You'll buy that, okay.
The following Mishnah doesn't start with an and, it starts with a the, and that's still relating to the king and the number of horses. So following that reasoning, you could use the and again, but it doesn't.
You could. We're not consistent. The Mishnah is not consistent. Okay, I think we've had a go at answering David's question. We've got something that he'll buy anyway, so that's good. All right, now then, let's spend some time now discussing what a Milchemet Reshut is. We have actually discussed it in the past, but I'm gonna do it all over again because it's very important. There is a machloket as to how many types of war there are. There is a Milchemet Reshut, a war of permission. Reshut means permission. If I ask your Reshut, When do you say that word, by the way?
Convening for a zimun.
Yes, birshut. Yeah, with the permission of. With the permission of. You ask permission. If this coming Shabbat on Friday night, I am going to be giving the drasha because the Rav has said that he might be drunk and will not be in a fit state, and so that I will begin my drasha birshut harav, with the permission of the Rav, because it's his job to do it. And so birshut means permission. So a milchemet rishut is a war that you have permission to do. That's one type of war. Then there is another type of war, which is called milchemet mitzvah. Now then, a mitzvah is what?
Commandment.
To defend your country.
Okay, a commandment. Mitzvah is a commandment. Now, what Johnny said, it's to defend your country. Now, that is one opinion. We will come to that in a minute. So the terminology, there is, so far we've got a war of permission, a war that you're permitted to do, a war that is a mitzvah, which you are commanded to do. And then according to one opinion, there's a third type of war. And that is a milchemet chovah. What is the word chovah? You all, well, maybe not all of you, I'm just looking around. I think most of you have a chovah, something in your computer, in your car, on a piece of paper. Most of you have a chovah. What is a chovah? An obligation. Okay, it means chovah means an obligation. Any of you drive here? Yeah. Okay. Well, you've got a chovah.
Yes.
License.
Yes. No. You have a bituach chovah, which you have to have if you're driving. What is that? What is bituach?
Bituach is security.
Correct. Or insurance.
Insurance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Insurance. Okay. Insurance.
Compulsory insurance.
So bituach chovah is your compulsory insurance. You have to have a bituach chovah to drive a car. You have to have compulsory insurance. If you drive without insurance in Israel, in the UK, I'm sure it's the same in the US. If you drive without insurance, that is an offense. You can't do that. But there are different types of insurance, aren't there? There's the compulsory insurance, which is third-party insurance. You have to be insured against the damage that you do to somebody else. And then there is what's called makif. Makif, which means the same word as hakafot. What do you do when you do a hakafot?
Go round. Circle.
You do a complete circuit. So your bituach makif is your insurance, which is complete circuit. It is comprehensive. So your comprehensive insurance is called makif, and your obligatory third-party insurance is called chovah. So the third type of war is milchemet chovah, an obligatory war. An obligatory war. So we have three types, according to one opinion anyway. A permitted war, a commanded war, and an obligatory war. Generally speaking, the accepted opinion is that there are only two types of war, and that the commanded war and the obligatory war are one and the same thing. Okay, but that's where we're going to go for the moment. There is this third opinion, which we'll eventually come to, that talks about a chovah. But for the purposes of our discussion now, there are two types of war. A permitted war and a war of mitzvah, a commanded war that you have to do. That's how we're going to describe the milchemet mitzvah, is a war that you have to do. And there are different laws according to milchemet mitzvah and according to milchemet reshut. Where do
Reshut mean property as well, Johnny? That reshut hayachid, I seem to remember.
No, it does and it doesn't. But it means your property, because a reshut hayachid is a place where only an individual has permission to go.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have permission to go into your house unless you give me permission. So therefore, that is your reshut hayachid. It is your individual permission to go into that property.
It's not the same word as reshut in this one, though.
It's the same word, but the and it comes from the same root, but it doesn't mean property. It means permission. So a reshut harabim.
I thought it was a man to war that going out to get property. That's why.
No. It turns out that way, but that's not what it means.
Okay.
To carry on your line though, the reason it means property in reshut hayachid, the opposite of a reshut hayachid is a reshut harabim.
Yeah.
Right. A public thoroughfare, a road. Reshut harabim is somewhere where the public can go. So the square in Netanya is a reshut harabim. The street is a reshut harabim. It's a place where the masses can go. Rabim means more than one person. So why is it called that? Because the Rabim, the people, have reshut, have permission to go there. Are you with me?
Yes.
So that's why the place is called a reshut. It's not the word for place is a makom, okay? But it's a makom where there is reshut for the rabbim. It's a place where there is permission for many people to go. But your thinking is correct, because ultimately we'll see what a milchemet reshut is. So we have two types of war. We have an optional war, a war which we are permitted to do, and an obligatory war, a war which we are commanded to do. Now, where in the Torah do we learn the halachot of warfare? Okay, let me ask you a different question. You are aware, I'm sure, that there are different categories of people who are exempt from going to war, and the Torah tells us about them. Let's see how many of them you can get before I show you where it is.
A new husband with a new house.
Okay, a new husband.
A chatan, yeah.
Okay, that's the chatan, a new husband.
Somebody
with
with
a house. A new house, yeah.
Somebody growing olives.
Not olives. You'd be on the right line.
Somebody growing new fruits.
Yes, a vineyard. Somebody who plants a vineyard.
Somebody who's frightened or a coward.
Somebody who's frightened, yeah. Any others? Not sure. I think that's it. Let's go and have a look. Where is it? David, tell us where it is, please.
It's in Parashat Shoftim.
It is indeed. It is on the screen for you. Jeffrey, on the screen, please, from the top.
When you go out to war against your enemies and you see horse and chariot, a people more numerous than you, you shall not be afraid of them, for the Lord your God is with you, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. And it will be when you approach the battle that the Kohen shall come near and speak to the people. And he shall say to them, Hear, O Israel, today you are approaching the battle against your enemies. Let your hearts not be faint. You shall not be afraid, and you shall not be alarmed, and you shall not be terrified because of them. For the Lord your God is the one who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies, to save you.
Stop there for a second, Jeffrey. Where have you heard that before? That last pasuk?
At the crossing of the Red Sea.
No.
It's in the prayer for the soldiers, isn't it?
It is.
Yes.
Ki Adonai Elohechem ha'olech imachem lilachem lachem im oivechem leoshia etchem v'nomah.
Amen.
Amen. We say it's the end of the Misha Berach for
the
Chayalim, which we say every single day now. Yes, that pasuk should be very, very familiar to you. And when you hear it tomorrow, then you can think of the translation here that Jeffrey's just read. For Hashem, your God, is the one who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies to save you. Okay, carry on, Jeffrey. This is where we're now getting into the nitty-gritty. Verse 5.
Excuse me, John. Is a Cohen involved today at all?
No. I'll come back to the Cohen.
No,
This is called the Cohen HaMashiach. This is called there was a special Cohen who had this job.
Yeah.
And the officers shall speak to the people, saying, what man is there who has built a new house and has
that one?
And has not yet inaugurated it? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in the war, and another man inaugurate it. And what man is there who has planted a vineyard and has not yet redeemed it? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in the war, and another man redeem it. And what man is there who has betrothed a woman and has not yet taken her? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in the war, and another man take her. And the officers shall continue to speak to the people and say, what man is there who is fearful and faint-hearted? Let him go and return to his house, that he should not cause the heart of his brothers to melt as his heart.
Okay, let's stop there. So we got them all, didn't we? We got them all. Well done. Well done to us. Now then, these psukim in Parashat Shoftim do not tell us what kind of a war we're talking about. What kind of war are we talking about? It just says, Ki tetzei la milchama al oivecha, when you go out to war against your enemies. So how do we know what type of war we're talking about? Are we talking about an optional war, or are we talking about a commanded war? Well, before we answer that question, we have to understand what these terms mean. Now, there are
enemy is a clue, isn't it?
Possibly, yes.
Wait a second. We just said that a king needs permission of the Sanhedrin to go to a Melchemet Reshut. And we've continued on from there. And therefore, we're talking about a Melchemet Reshut.
Where does it say that? We're not in the Gemarah now. We're in the Torah. Where does it say in the Torah that it's a Melchemet Reshut? It doesn't.
Okay.
The Gemarah is going to tell us later on, and another Gemarah, which I'm going to show you in Sota, will help us out. So, what is the difference? Okay, somebody mentioned a defensive war as opposed to an offensive war. Now, let's go down that line for a moment. If we say that a obligatory war, a Milchemet Mitzvah, is a defensive war, that means that is a war where we are being attacked and we have to defend ourselves. Okay. In that case, what is an optional war? An offensive war, where we initiate an attack. Michael Kraus doesn't like it. Why not, Michael?
Because the compulsory war is one where it's mandated in the Torah. So therefore, when God said you can take all the land as effectively as far as the Euphrates, and therefore it was a mitzvah to do that.
Okay, that is definitely one opinion, Michael. You are quite right. There is one opinion that says that a Milchemet Mitzvah, a commanded war, is only the war which Joshua waged when he crossed the Jordan and battled against the 7 nations that were in Eretz Canaan. And that is the only Milchemet Mitzvah. That's the very narrow interpretation of the words Milchemet Mitzvah, because that makes sense, because that was a mitzvah. We're told in the Torah, when you cross the Jordan, you need to go and conquer these lands. Okay? And that is a mitzvah. So the very narrow interpretation of Milchemet Mitzvah is that the only war that is a milchemet mitzvah is this war that we've just spoken about, and everything else forevermore is a milchemet reshut. Now, there's a bit of a problem with that, and most of the rabbis don't agree with that in narrow interpretation, and they say that any war which is akin to that war of Joshua, in other words, any war which involves the conquest or defense of the biblical land of Israel, is a milchemet mitzvah, is a commanded war. 1 second, Johnny. So, according to that opinion, any war which is either designed to gain more territory than we already have, but the territory that we're gaining is within the boundaries of the biblical land of Israel, would be considered a milchemet mitzvah. And in addition, and this is the most important thing for us, any war which means that we, if we lose it, we will lose part of the biblical land of Israel, must therefore be considered to be a milchemet mitzvah, because you are fighting in order to have, in our case, to retain the biblical land of Israel. And that is how most of the rabbis interpret milchemet mitzvah, that a milchemet mitzvah is a war which involves conquest or defense of the biblical land of Israel. Any war which involves the conquest of territory outside of the biblical land of Israel is not considered a mitzvah. It is considered a reshut, a permission, and therefore that is the distinction. That is the most popular and commonly held explanation of milchemet reshut and milchemet mitzvah. First of all, I think we've got Johnny, and then Julia, and then Sharon, in that order. Johnny.
I was going to say we don't take God's name lightly, but in the current battles we've got, when the poor boys that have soldiers die and fall in battle, we say Al Kiddush Hashem.
Correct.
Which is like a mitzvah.
Yes, agreed. And I think that would fit in with our explanation that we've just said. Agreed.
Yes.
Yeah. Julia.
Mine's a question. Apart from the need for the consent of the 71 Beth Din, are there other differences between a milchemet mitzvah and a milchemet reshut?
Yes, lots, and we'll be coming to them soon.
Okay.
Sharon. You're on mute, Sharon.
My understanding from working on international law as regarding the disputed lands, I won't even call them territories, whatever, is that there are many different biblical maps depending on biblical times. What do you mean by biblical? Do you mean Chumash? Do you mean Judges? Do you mean Kings? Do you mean Solomon? Do you mean when it's only Yehuda? What does it mean?
Good, very good question. As you will not be surprised to hear, we don't really know. It's open to interpretation. Probably the majority opinion is what is in the Chumash, which would therefore include pretty much up to Beirut and maybe even as far as Damascus, but not Eilat. And that is the majority opinion. But Sharon is right. Like everything in life, this the term biblical land of Israel is open to interpretation. But the majority of opinions would be the biblical land of Israel refers to what the borders are set out in the Torah itself. Okay, so we have now got a working definition. It's not perfect, but we've got a working definition of what a milchemet mitzvah is. It's a defensive or even offensive war. Now that's why it's important that we don't just use those terms defensive and offensive, because the 6-Day War we attacked, right? So you can say that was still a defensive war because we attacked in order to defend ourselves. It was a preemptive attack, but it was still an attack, and therefore by definition we took the offensive, and we use that expression, don't we? You take the offensive, and you. So I don't like the terms offensive and defensive because it's too blurry around the edges there.
But in 67, you're not talking about the biblical land of Israel. Sinai is not the biblical land of Israel.
Jerusalem was the biblical land of Israel.
That was only an accident of fate afterwards.
That may well be, but that was the result.
But it wasn't the initiator. That was on the 3rd or the 4th day of the war, and the war was only 6 days. The war started, with the attack on Egypt in Sinai, and Sinai, as far as I understand, is not considered part of biblical Israel.
Correct, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that actually demonstrates very clearly our difficulty with the definitions, because I said that I don't like the offensive and defensive terms for exactly that reason, Hannah. Because why did we attack the Egyptian Air Force on day 1 of the 6-Day War? We did it to prevent the Egyptian Air Force from attacking the biblical land of Israel and getting rid of us. And so
it's
therefore,
preemptive.
Correct. Therefore, it was a preemptive strike in a defensive manner. We had no interest in occupying the Sinai Desert or any part of Egypt, except as a buffer in order to defend our land of Israel. It is a very, very different thing. And that, by the way, is why when we actually populated the Sinai Desert, the most famous of the settlements there was Yamit. Anybody go to Yamit back in the day? I did. I was taken there by my kibbutz when I was in kibbutz in 1977, and we were shown Yamit as the flagship of what could happen with peace with Egypt. But Yamit was not in the biblical land of Israel. It was in the Sinai Desert. And you could therefore argue, and Hannah would be right on this particular point, that once we set up Yamit and all those other settlements in the Sinai Desert, it retrospectively made that war into a Milchemet Reshut, because that wasn't what it was meant to be. If we had just kept the Sinai Desert as a buffer against an attack on our biblical land of Israel, you could say that it was definitely a Milchemet Mitzvah. It blurs the margins once you start to settle somebody else's land that you have captured outside the biblical boundaries. Now, there are no, as far as I'm aware, there is no opinion that says the Sinai Desert is part of the biblical land of Israel. And therefore, settling the Sinai Desert would be part of a Milchemet Reshut. Maybe you can have a war which is both, but that would make life a bit more difficult. Let's stick to one or the other for the moment. So a Milchemet Mitzvah is a war which is whose purpose is to either conquer the biblical land of Israel or defend the land of Israel by whatever means. And if defending the land of Israel means taking an offensive position and a preemptive strike, as on the first day of the 6-Day War, then, in my opinion, others may disagree, in my opinion, that makes it a Milchemet Mitzvah. I agree, once post facto, after the events, and you start to settle those lands, that blurs the margin. And you would then have to say, well, those settlements are actually not really settlements, they're just buffer zones, and they are in effect the way we are buffering. It blurs the margins. You could argue that Michael Krauss likes that idea, but there would be others, Michael, who would vehemently disagree with you. And I think that's, I think there are valid arguments on both sides of that particular argument. So let's agree, unless anybody is vehemently opposed to this, that the definition of a milchemet mitzvah, a mitzvah war, is a war to defend the biblical land of Israel, or to conquer the biblical land of Israel by whatever means it takes. And every other war, meaning any war which is designed to expand the territory beyond the biblical land of Israel, not for defensive purposes, but for empire purposes, for colonial purposes. Take all the other empires that the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, the Persian Empire, which we'll be reading about tomorrow night. How many provinces did Ahasuerus rule over?
127.
127. And where did it stretch from, Leslie?
Kush to
Ended in India, didn't it?
India, Mehodu, India, and Kush. Where's Kush?
Africa.
Yeah, where particularly is Kush, particularly?
Sudan.
Ethiopia. You weren't far. Ethiopia. Kush is Ethiopia. So Ahasuerus, where was he sat ruling this place?
Shushan.
Shushan. Where's that?
Persia.
Persia. So he's sat in Persia and he's ruling over Ethiopia and India. Okay. So you can't say that his wars, they weren't his actually, he just took over from the Babylonians. But whoever it was that expanded the empire as far as from Hodu ad Kush, India to Ethiopia, that wasn't milchemet mitzvah. That wasn't designed to defend the territories of Persia or the territories of Babylonia or what it was designed. That was an offensive thing to expand your territories. If the Jewish people were to do that, that would be called a milchemet reshut. And there was one king, most famously, who undertook wars which we would call milchemet reshut, permission wars, and not milchemet mitzvah, not defensive wars. And who was that?
David.
King David. We will learn it when we carry on in Shmuel Bet over the next few months. Many of David's wars were expansive wars outside of his territory, and those were milchamot reshut. Those were wars of permission. Every other war that's going on up until then, all the wars that we've read about with Shaul and with against the Plishtim, these are all milchamot mitzvah. They are all mitzvah wars because they are to defend or to conquer the biblical land of Israel. Now, we're going to stop there because time is up. Next time, in 2 weeks' time, we will discuss Julia's question. What is the difference between the two wars? We've got one difference very clearly in our Mishnah, and that is the 71 Sanhedrin. The Mishnah, I'll give you a little taster. The Mishnah says that a milchemet reshut needs 71 Sanhedrin. Implication, Julia, implying?
The milchemet mitzvah doesn't need consent.
Correct, implying that a milchemet mitzvah does not need the consent of a Sanhedrin. So there's one clear distinction. We will discuss what the psukim that are on the screen at the moment for you from Sefer Dvarim, which Jeffrey just read out for us, about who goes to what war. We will discuss whether that applies to mitzvah or reshut or both. And you'll see there will be differences. We will also whiz over next time to here, Gemarah Sota 44a, if you want to look it up beforehand. If you don't want a spoiler, don't look it up. We'll be looking about that, which discusses all the things that we've mentioned now. So we've managed to do 2 words today, Milchemet Reshut, and we haven't even finished that. So we'll carry on, please God, in 2 weeks' time. In the meantime, are there any questions or comments on today's shiur? Comment, go ahead.
Could you say that Reshut is a bounded area?
No.
It's an area that's got to have a perimeter. It's not just some.
You mean when we use the expression Reshut Yachid and Reshut Rabin?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. By definition, it's a boundary because there must be a boundary between one and the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a Reshut is an area that's got a boundary. So
therefore, what you're saying is that when we go out of our boundary, that's a Milchemet Reshut. That's a nice connection, actually. It's a nice connection. But we need to understand that the Reshut meaning a boundary, obviously, as you will know, the word for boundary is not Reshut, it's Gevul.
No.
And the reason that it is because of the permission. Who's got permission to go within those bounded areas? That's why it's called a Reshut, because the word Reshut comes from, it means permission. Any other comments or questions? Okay, I'll wish you a Purim Sameach. Tomorrow night, Megillah. And then we've got a party in our place. I'm sure you've all got parties in your place. Spare a thought for those that can't have a party, but don't be miserable. Be happy because they can't and we must. Purim Sameach, everybody. See you.
Purim
Thank
Sameach.
you very much.
Bye.
Bye.